Hi, it's just David here with my weekly video. Um, in the 80s, 90s, I don't know, there was a rock band called the Manic Street Preachers. They're probably all old age pensioners now. But they released an album called This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours. It's quite a clever title, and it's sort of um, a pun on what you might call modern relativism. It's the idea that, I have things that are true and you have things that are true for you, and that they might be quite different. I think we get kind of quite confused about this in the modern world. So I want to say a little bit about where the idea comes from. It's basically an idea, I think, about sort of freedom, freedom of choice, liberalism, things which in themselves are all good. And of course, it's rooted in consumerism. I can choose whatever I like in the supermarket. There's a huge array, and who are you to kind of limit my choices? But I should be able to make my own life goals. There's much more important than getting what you really really want in life, and being free to choose those goals. You might think that sounds fairly good, and in many ways, it's not bad. It's brought happiness and certain amount of prosperity. I wonder whether I want to choose my own goals and get what I want in life is exactly what Jesus would have said for Christians, and how sometimes unthinkingly we're kind of swept up in that. But we kind of get what people mean. And of course, what we don't want is the opposite. We don't want other people telling other people what to do or what to think or what to like. And of course, in many areas of life, that's fine. I might like certain sort of music or cookery. You might like completely different sort of cookery and music. And it'd be a very dull world if we had to all like the same things. But those, if you like, are a matter of taste. It's clear that, just, I don't know, spicy Indian food agrees with me, where it might not agree with you. I like classical music. You might prefer something with a bit of a beat that you can dance to. I don't know. Um, and it's clear, as I say, we wouldn't want to limit the taste in those things. But what about then a freedom of opinion? Well, we might say yes, people, of course, have freedom of opinions. Uh, I might believe, for instance, that it's right or wrong to do certain things. I believe that, for instance, the government ought to provide certain services, perhaps, and you might vote for a party that believes that that isn't right and it ought to be left up to the individual. And sometimes we'll go to the ballot box in democracy to think about how we're going to run things, about what's the right approach. And of course, particularly because we've lived in a world sometimes where it hasn't happened, we treasure that. We treasure those freedoms of opinion. Of course, sometimes freedom of opinion is just about not knowing what's right or what's for the best, and that's rather different, because it may be that there is a best level for interest rates, for instance, which would be produce the best, most prosperous society. We just don't know what it is, so we have to kind of hear a variety of opinions. That's a bit different from saying it's just a matter of taste. That's just saying that we're ignorant of some things. Then there are other things where really, in a sense, well, I suppose you can have opinions, but you're not really, in a sense, it's nonsensical to say those things are equally valid. I'm thinking particularly of things in science. I mean, you might think the moon is made of cheese and the sun is, 5 miles above the horizon, and the earth is square and dinosaurs still live in Coventry. I don't know. I suppose you're free to believe those. I mean, they are mad opinions to anybody who holds them. They aren't true. And, you know, more or less everybody agrees that they aren't true. So I think there was once a dictator who said that pi should be the number 3.14159, that as in pi r squared, all the rest of it. Pi should be rounded down to 3, and all his engineers should kind of use 3 for pi. That's not great if you're an engineer. And while the dictator said it and kind of had the force to say it, it didn't really go well for his engineers, because it's not just something you make up your mind about in that sense. Perhaps the most difficult middle ground then are morals. What is it right to do? And you might say, well, people have different opinions over morals as well, and they do. But let's do a bit of a sliding scale and see where you stop. Let's see. So if I said to you, I think we ought to celebrate Easter on this day, but Orthodox Christians and some other groups celebrate it on this day, is that worth falling out over? And you might think, well, it's not really. It's the date of Easter, and you know, it's just a matter of sort of custom. Okay, so we'll kind of give each other a bit of leeway on that. If I said to you, Christian teaching is that sex should only be inside marriage and that other forms of relationships are not acceptable, you might think, well, hang on a minute, you know, we just don't live like that anymore. That's all. And anyway, who is the church or you to dictate people's sexual morals? And we don't want, you know, laws against, I don't know, fornication or adultery or homosexuality back, and we don't really want to go back to days when we looked down on you know, children born outside of wedlock. So that's a tricky one, really, because, you know, there is a traditional teaching, but we're uneasy about insisting on it. Let's move up the scale. Let's move up the scale to female genital mutilation. People go sometimes take young girls to have this rather unpleasant procedure done to them. And this is a difficult one because in some societies it is, if you like, customary. It's part of the tradition. We in the UK have decided it's not okay. So much so that actually, even if you go to a foreign country and take your child or whoever there to do it, when you come back to this country, you could be criminally prosecuted. So we've kind of set the bar there. But there will be some people in this country who say, well, actually, it's just a matter of custom. And if I want to go to my own country and my own people and do it, why shouldn't I? Murder. I know I'm moving up the scale here, but that's the point. I mean, very few people will say murder's okay. Some people might say, well, there are circumstances in which killing another person is okay. But, you know, relatively few will say that murder is okay. And once you get north of murder, as it were, it's cold-blooded murder, genocide, or whatever, then, you know, we're all agreed it's wrong. Now, as I say, this is where, you know, opinion shades into something a bit harder, and it's quite difficult to say where that line lies. For those who believe in God, of course, we have a bit of a different view of this, because we believe that God has commanded certain things generally. I mean, not all religions do, but most religions do, and that we ought to kind of live by God's rules. In other words, we might not be free to make the rules up. They might be, in some sense, given to us by God. And of course, it may well be that we might argue because we don't know, we're not quite sure. And, you know, the present argument in the church about homosexuality is a very good example. We're not quite sure really what God says. So we'll kind of be easygoing because actually, you know, it's not clear cut. But other things again, like murder, you know, is quite clear cut. And if you don't have God, I mean, you can still live a good, upright, moral life, but of course you have to work that bit hard to think, well, where do the rules come from? You know, how can it, if it's just two beings arguing and you're arguing with a psychopath and saying, well, murder's wrong, and the psychopath is saying, no, I think it's okay. If you haven't kind of got God, then is it just two people arguing about values? Is it the same as arguing, you know, one of us likes Beethoven, one of us likes 1980s pop music? We want to feel it's more serious than that, but in the end, is it? Difficult to know. You might prompt me to, might prompt to ask why I'm talking about all this. And I think it just occurred to me this weekend, two things have happened which have raised the problem of sort of real evil, I think. First of all, was that awful shooting, and I know in America they have far more, but that awful shooting by Jake Davidson in Plymouth of those 5 people, from a really rather hateful ideology that he seemed to have sort of taken over, the so-called incel movement. And then also the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, as you know, watching this Kabul is seem to have capitulated. Now, no, particularly with the second one, actually, the Taliban are making some statements of sort of slightly softer reconciliation. I don't know, but of course, certainly there have been times when groups like that, Islamist groups, have done pretty awful things. And I say that not kind of anti-Islam, because I mean most Muslims would agree. Most Muslims are not fundamentalist extremists. So, as you know, Afghanistan is sort of taken over. I mean, there will be questions, even if the Taliban actually are, saying they're not going to take revenge, they are going to respect women's rights, etc. I mean, there is something to be watched there, and I think it is very difficult for us in the West because obviously we do have different views. That's fine. There's kind of different customs, but there is a threshold, I think, when for instance, the rights of women are so downtrodden, that we actually just have to say it's wrong. Sorry, you know. And I think sometimes we have to be prepared to say that, and that's quite a hard thing to say. And of course, with shootings and things, you have to say, look, it's not a matter of opinion. It's wrong. And I think Christians, we can do that because we have, if you like, God has told us these things are wrong, that treating people with love and respect, not killing people, that treating life as sacred, is part of the Christian tradition. So I just wanted to reflect really there, and just think that we treasure our freedom. We want to be able to have our opinions. That's absolutely right, and I'm not trying to kind of go down on those, because actually, generally having your own opinion and being free to explore and to think is the thing that will lead us to truth. So actually, that's important, that we're able to talk freely and debate about these things. But I think that's not the same thing as saying everything is relative, that in the end there is no truth. I want to say my truth is that there are truths that are universal. There are rules of morality, of love, of respect, of the sacredness of life, which can't just be trumped by somebody's freedom of opinion. Those, I believe, are absolute truths given to us by God and revealed by Him in the Scriptures and in Jesus Christ. And therefore, I want to say there are some times when we see evil emerge, and however kind of unmodern, unliberal it might be, say we just have to say it's wrong. And as I say, I think sometimes we have to be quite brave in saying that. Thank you.